Either this wolf is the unluckiest animal in Montana, Emily Carter muttered, staring down at the massive black creature sprawled across the porch of her clinic, or he's the best actor I've ever met. The wolf opened one amber eye, let out a dramatic wheeze that sounded suspiciously timed, and dropped his head back onto her welcome mat. Emily folded her arms against the cool morning air and looked toward the pine-covered hills glowing gold beneath the first light of dawn. The town of Silver Creek was still waking up. A delivery truck rumbled somewhere down Main Street. Wind chimes clinked softly from a neighboring porch. The scent of fresh coffee drifted from the diner across the road. It should have been an ordinary Thursday morning. Instead, there was a 150-pound black wolf pretending to be on the verge of collapse outside her clinic for the third time that week. Emily crouched beside him. His thick fur shimmered almost blue beneath the sunlight. His breathing sounded perfectly normal now. Interesting. 10 minutes ago, according to the dramatic performance she had witnessed through her office window, he had apparently been fighting for his life. "You know," she said softly, brushing a hand over his shoulder. "Most patients try to avoid the vet." The wolf's tail thumped once against the wooden porch before immediately going still, as if he had forgotten himself. Emily narrowed her eyes. That was strange too. Everything about this animal was strange. 3 days earlier, he had arrived limping so badly she thought he might have a fractured leg. She had examined him from nose to tail, only to discover absolutely nothing wrong. The next morning he returned with an alarming cough. After 2 hours of observation, the cough had mysteriously vanished. Yesterday he had appeared exhausted and weak, barely able to stand. 20 minutes later, she caught him chasing a squirrel across her parking lot faster than any healthy wolf she had ever seen. And now this. Another collapse. Another emergency. Another performance. "Emily," called a familiar voice. She glanced up to see old Mr. Dawson crossing the street with a paper bag of pastries tucked beneath one arm. He followed her gaze and laughed. "Your boyfriend is back." Emily groaned. "He's a wolf. Still more reliable than most men I know." Mr. Dawson continued walking before she could respond. Heat touched her cheeks despite the chilly morning. The entire town had become invested in the mystery animal. Nobody knew where he came from. Nobody knew why he kept showing up at her clinic. But everyone had noticed that whenever Emily finished helping another injured animal, the giant black wolf somehow appeared within hours, as if he were watching, waiting. Emily reached for her stethoscope and placed it gently against the wolf's chest. A steady heartbeat echoed through the metal. Strong, healthy, not even slightly concerning. She sighed. "You're impossible." The wolf lifted his head. For a moment their eyes met. Emily froze. She had worked with animals her entire life. She knew the look of fear, hunger, curiosity, affection, but this gaze felt different. Intelligent, deliberate, almost human. It sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Then the wolf sneezed loudly and flopped sideways again as if all his strength had suddenly abandoned him. Emily laughed despite herself. "Fine," she said, standing and opening the clinic door. "Come inside, Drama King." The wolf instantly rose to his feet. Not slowly, not weakly, instantly. Emily caught it. So did the wolf. They stared at each other for one awkward second before he gave a low, innocent whine. Emily pointed a finger at him. "I knew it." But even as she spoke, she couldn't stop smiling. What she didn't know was that somewhere beyond the tree line overlooking Silver Creek, hidden among the shadows of towering pines, a man with silver eyes was watching through the wolf's gaze and smiling right back. Emily Carter had spent most of her life surrounded by creatures that could not explain what hurt. A trembling rescue dog hiding beneath a table, a barn cat refusing to eat, a hawk with a damaged wing staring at her with silent fear. Animals did not need words. They spoke through posture, breathing, movement, and instinct. That was why the black wolf bothered her so much. Nothing about him made sense. By noon, the clinic had settled into its usual rhythm. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, warming the faded hardwood floor. The scent of antiseptic mixed with fresh coffee and cedar from the shelves her father had built years ago. Emily moved between exam rooms, checking on a recovering golden retriever and a pair of abandoned kittens curled together inside a blanket-lined crate. Every few minutes, she found herself glancing toward the lobby. The wolf remained there, not sleeping, watching. Whenever she looked up, amber eyes were already fixed on her. It should have felt unsettling. Instead, it felt strangely familiar. During a quiet moment, she carried a bowl of water into the waiting area and set it beside him. The wolf immediately sat up straight. His ears perked. His tail swept the floor once. "Amazing recovery," Emily said dryly. "A few hours ago, I thought you were on your last breath." The wolf lowered his head and pretended to inspect the water. She almost laughed. The bell above the front door chimed. A young boy hurried inside, carrying a cardboard box. "Miss Carter, can you help?" Emily crossed the room instantly. Inside the box sat a tiny gray rabbit with one ear folded awkwardly. The boy looked close to tears. "I found him near the creek." Emily softened her voice. "You did the right thing bringing him here." As she carried the rabbit toward an exam room, she noticed movement behind her. The wolf had risen and was following. "No." Emily pointed toward the lobby. "Stay." To her surprise, he stopped immediately. Not reluctantly, not confused. He obeyed like someone who understood every word. Emily paused. Most wild animals would have ignored her completely. The wolf simply sat down and waited. 20 minutes later, she emerged carrying the rabbit, now wrapped in a small towel. The boy's relieved smile filled the room. After he left, Emily looked toward the lobby again. The wolf was gone. For a brief moment, disappointment tugged unexpectedly at her chest. Then a shadow passed outside the window. There he was, not leaving, not wandering into the forest, waiting beneath the giant maple tree across the street, watching the clinic, watching her. The afternoon drifted by. Beneath clear Montana skies, customers came and went. Deliveries arrived. The town moved through another ordinary day. Yet every time Emily glanced outside, she found the same black shape resting beneath the tree. As sunset painted the mountains gold and copper, she locked the clinic door and gathered her things. The evening air carried the scent of pine needles and distant rain. She stepped onto the sidewalk and turned toward home. Soft footsteps followed. Emily looked over her shoulder. The wolf stood 20 feet away. "You are not coming home with me." The wolf blinked. She started walking. A moment later, the footsteps resumed. 5 blocks later, he was still there. Not crowding her. Not threatening. Simply following. By the time she reached the small white cottage at the edge of town, twilight had settled across the valley. Crickets sang from the grass. Porch lights flickered on one by one. Emily climbed the front steps and turned around. The wolf sat patiently at the bottom, looking entirely too pleased with himself. She stared. He stared back. "You know," she said slowly, setting down her bag, "I am starting to think this is not an accident." Somewhere far beyond the darkening hills, hidden where no human eyes could see, a silver-eyed king smiled at the sound of those words. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of scratching. Not loud scratching, not destructive scratching, just 3 polite taps against the front porch. Tap, tap, tap. She stared at the ceiling of her bedroom for several seconds before groaning softly and reaching for her phone. 6:38 in the morning. Nobody should be visiting at 6:38 in the morning. Pulling on a sweatshirt, she shuffled through the house and opened the front door. Cold mountain air greeted her first. Then she saw him. The black wolf sat perfectly upright beside a flower pot on the porch as if he had been waiting for hours. The moment the door opened, his tail brushed the wooden boards once. Emily closed her eyes. "No." The wolf tilted his head. "You do not live here." Another head tilt. "You definitely do not pay property taxes." The wolf blinked. Somehow that felt like judgment. Emily rubbed her face and stepped outside. The sky above Silver Creek glowed pale pink as dawn stretched across the horizon. The mountains stood dark and silent in the distance. Everything felt peaceful. Everything except the increasingly suspicious animal sitting on her porch like he owned the place. She crouched beside him and began another examination. Nose, eyes, breathing, posture, fur condition, weight distribution. Everything appeared completely normal. Healthier than normal, actually. Most wild animals carried signs of hardship. This wolf looked like he belonged on the cover of a wildlife magazine. Thick coat, bright eyes, strong muscles. Not a single indication of illness. Emily narrowed her eyes. "Let me guess. Today you are perfectly healthy." The wolf immediately coughed. Once. Loudly. Then he looked at her. Emily stared. The wolf stared back. Neither moved. Finally she pointed at him. That was fake. The wolf yawned dramatically and looked away. Her jaw dropped. "Oh, you are impossible." 40 minutes later, she was unlocking the clinic while the wolf followed at a casual distance behind her. Several townspeople noticed immediately. Mrs. Harper laughed from across the street. "Your shadow is back. Do not encourage him," Emily called. "Too late for that," Mrs. Harper replied. The wolf seemed pleased with this exchange. By mid-morning, the clinic was busy. A border collie needed a routine checkup. A retired rancher brought in an aging horse for evaluation. A family arrived carrying an anxious orange cat. Through it all, the wolf remained nearby. Sometimes he sat outside the front window. Sometimes he rested beneath a tree. Sometimes Emily caught him watching through the glass with an intensity that felt almost unsettling. During lunch, she finally decided to test a theory. Carrying 2 dog treats from a storage cabinet, she stepped outside. The wolf rose instantly. "Okay," Emily said. "If you are really a wild animal, you should ignore commands." The wolf remained still. "Sit." He was already sitting. Emily frowned. "Stay. No movement. Come here." He walked directly toward her. She froze. "You have got to be kidding me." The wolf stopped exactly where she expected and accepted the treat with perfect manners. Not snapping, not grabbing, not rushing. Emily laughed in disbelief. "Either somebody trained you, or you are secretly a genius." The wolf's ears perked at the word genius. Emily noticed, and that was when a strange realization settled over her. The symptoms, the appearances, the timing, the obedience. None of it felt random anymore. For the first time, she began wondering if the wolf was not showing up because he needed help. Maybe he was showing up because he wanted something. The question was what? Across town, hidden high above the valley in a private lodge surrounded by pine forests, Alexander Blackwood stood beside a floor-to-ceiling window. His silver eyes reflected the morning light as he watched through a magical connection only an alpha king could maintain with his wolf form. A slow smile touched his face. Down below, Emily Carter was finally beginning to ask the right questions. By the end of the week, Emily Carter had developed a routine she never planned to have. Unlock the clinic. Feed the stray cat that lived behind the building. Start the coffee maker. Check appointments. And greet the enormous black wolf waiting somewhere nearby. It should have felt ridiculous. Instead, it felt normal. That realization bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Friday afternoon arrived beneath clear blue skies. Sunlight spilled across Silver Creek, turning storefront windows into sheets of gold. The mountains beyond town stood sharp against the horizon, their peaks still carrying traces of spring snow. Emily stepped outside during a break and found the wolf exactly where she expected, curled beneath the maple tree, watching the clinic. Watching her. "You really do not have anything else to do, do you?" she asked. The wolf lifted his head immediately. Emily shook hers and sat on the bench nearby. For several moments, neither moved. Cars rolled past. Wind rustled through the leaves overhead. Somewhere down the block, children laughed as they chased one another across a playground. The wolf seemed unusually calm today. No coughing, no limping, no dramatic collapses, just quiet observation. Emily studied him carefully. Every instinct she had as a veterinarian told her this animal was healthy, strong, intelligent. Yet she could not shake the feeling that something remained hidden beneath the surface. It was there in the way he watched people, the way he seemed to understand conversations, the way his reactions arrived just a second too perfectly, as if he always knew what was coming. "Who are you?" she asked softly. The question escaped before she realized it. The wolf blinked. A breeze shifted through his dark fur. For a moment his gaze held hers with an intensity that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. Then a truck backfired somewhere across town. The spell broke. The wolf stood and stretched. Emily laughed at herself. "Listen to me. Talking to you like you were going to answer." But somewhere deep inside, she was beginning to wonder. Miles away, inside a secluded mountain estate hidden among towering pines, Alexander Blackwood leaned against a stone balcony overlooking endless forest. The afternoon wind tugged gently at his dark hair. His silver eyes remained distant, focused on the magical connection he maintained with his wolf form. "You are smiling again." Alexander glanced toward the voice. Nathan Hayes, his beta and oldest friend, stepped onto the balcony carrying 2 cups of coffee. "That is becoming a problem." Alexander accepted one without looking away from the forest. "Is it? For a man who rules half the Northern Territories, yes." Nathan studied him carefully. "You have ignored 3 council meetings this week. The council survived. Barely. Alexander took a slow sip. A faint smile touched his lips again. Nathan immediately groaned. There it is. What? That look. Alexander finally turned. What look? The look of a man making terrible decisions. Nathan folded his arms. Tell me you are not still visiting the veterinarian. Silence. Nathan closed his eyes. You are. She is interesting. Interesting. Nathan repeated the word as though it physically hurt. You are the Alpha King. Entire regions depend on your decisions. You have ambassadors waiting, governors requesting meetings. Yet somehow your schedule revolves around a woman who rescues rabbits and lectures your wolf for pretending to cough. Alexander looked back toward the distant valley. A memory surfaced instantly. Emily kneeling in the dirt beside an injured fox days earlier. Gentle hands, patient voice, kindness with no expectation of reward. The image warmed something inside him that years of power had never touched. That is exactly why she is interesting, he said quietly. Back in Silver Creek, Emily rose from the bench and headed inside as the afternoon appointments resumed. She did not notice the wolf watching her go. She did not notice the way his amber eyes softened. And she definitely did not know that somewhere beyond the mountains, the most powerful man in the territory had just admitted something he had spent weeks trying to deny. Rain arrived 2 days later. A soft spring storm rolled across the valley before sunrise, wrapping Silver Creek in silver mist and steady drumming water. Emily loved days like this. The streets grew quiet. The mountains disappeared behind clouds. Even the town seemed to slow its heartbeat. She unlocked the clinic just after 7 and stepped inside, carrying a paper cup of coffee. The familiar scent of cedar, clean linens, and pet shampoo greeted her immediately. For the first time in over a week, she allowed herself to wonder if the black wolf might finally stay away. The weather was miserable. The roads were wet. The forest trails would be slick with mud. Surely even he had limits. 30 seconds later, a loud sneeze sounded from outside the front door. Emily closed her eyes. Of course. She opened the door. The wolf stood there completely soaked. Rainwater dripped from his thick black fur onto the porch. His ears flattened dramatically. Another sneeze followed. Then he looked up at her with what appeared suspiciously like wounded dignity. Emily laughed despite herself. You walked through a rainstorm just to sit outside my clinic? The wolf sneezed again. Do not try to make me feel guilty. He sneezed a third time. That is not even convincing anymore. Yet 10 minutes later, he was lying on a pile of clean towels near the reception desk, while a space heater hummed nearby. Emily pretended not to notice how satisfied he looked. The morning passed quietly. Rain tapped against the windows. Customers trickled in and out carrying umbrellas. Somewhere around noon, Emily found herself talking to the wolf while organizing supplies. It happened so naturally that she did not realize she was doing it. Mrs. Harper thinks I should name you. The wolf looked up immediately. Personally, I think that is a terrible idea. His ears twitched. Because if I name you, that means I am admitting you are staying. The wolf rested his head on his paws. And you are definitely not staying. His tail swept across the floor once. Emily pointed at him. Do not start. Hours later, high in the mountains beyond Silver Creek, Alexander sat inside his private study. Massive windows overlooked endless pine forests disappearing into the rain. Nathan stood across from him, holding a stack of documents that had clearly been ignored. You missed another council session. Alexander remained focused on the magical image forming within a silver bowl on his desk. The image showed Emily arranging medicine bottles while talking to his wolf. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Nathan stared in disbelief. You are watching her organize shelves. Silence. For 20 minutes. More silence. Nathan dropped the documents onto a nearby chair. I have finally figured it out. Alexander glanced up. Figured out what? Why you refused to introduce yourself. The Alpha King leaned back slightly. Nathan folded his arms. Because if you arrived as Alexander Blackwood, ruler of the Northern Territories, she would treat you differently. The smile disappeared. Alexander looked back toward the image of Emily. Rain streaked down the clinic windows behind her. She looked peaceful, comfortable, completely unaware of the power, politics, and expectations attached to his name. Yes, he admitted quietly. Nathan blinked. Alexander rarely admitted anything. She would see the title first. His voice remained calm. The crown, the responsibility, the distance. She would become careful around me. In the image, Emily knelt to refill a water bowl. The wolf immediately stood and followed her. Alexander's expression softened. "This way," he said. "She only sees me." Back in Silver Creek, Emily looked down as the wolf settled beside her feet again. She shook her head with a smile. "You really do not like being alone, do you?" The wolf gazed up at her. And for the first time, the answer was completely true. The following Monday began with sunshine, clear skies, and a mystery that finally pushed Emily Carter past curiosity and straight into suspicion. She was carrying a bag of pet food across the clinic parking lot when she noticed the wolf standing beside the fence. At first glance, everything looked normal. Then he limped. Emily froze mid-step. The limp was dramatic. One front paw barely touched the ground. His shoulders dipped unevenly. His expression practically screamed suffering. "Oh no," Emily said, immediately hurrying toward him. The wolf gave a soft whine. Emily knelt beside him. What happened this time? She carefully examined the injured leg. No swelling, no tenderness, no cuts, no reaction when she touched it. The wolf remained perfectly still throughout the examination. Emily frowned. "That is strange." She stood and walked back toward the clinic entrance. Behind her, she heard footsteps. For perfectly normal footsteps. Emily stopped. The footsteps stopped. Slowly, she turned around. The wolf was standing several yards away. Completely balanced. Completely healthy. Then he noticed her looking. Instantly, the limp returned. Emily stared. The wolf limped forward dramatically. Emily stared harder. The wolf added a tiny whimper for extra effect. "No." The word escaped before she could stop it. The wolf blinked. Emily folded her arms. "You are faking." The wolf looked offended. "You are absolutely faking." A passing customer glanced between them. "Everything okay?" Emily pointed at the wolf. "He is pretending to be injured." The customer looked at the wolf. The wolf immediately lifted the paw and looked pitiful. "Oh, poor thing," the customer said. Emily threw both hands into the air. "See? This is exactly what I mean." The wolf seemed extremely pleased with himself. The rest of the morning only made things worse. Every time Emily left the building, a new symptom appeared. At 10 o'clock, he seemed exhausted. By 11, he was energetic enough to chase leaves across the parking lot. At noon, he appeared weak and fragile until someone offered him a treat. Then his recovery was nothing short of miraculous. By early afternoon, Emily sat behind her desk reviewing charts while the wolf rested nearby, or pretended to rest. Every few minutes, she caught one amber eye opening slightly to watch her. The moment she looked back, it closed again. "I know you are awake." No response. "You are terrible at this game." Silence. Then the tip of his tail moved. Emily laughed despite herself. Somewhere along the way, annoyance had become affection. The realization caught her off guard. She enjoyed his presence. The clinic felt oddly empty whenever he disappeared. That should have worried her. Instead, it made her smile. Far away in the mountains, Alexander sat at a conference table surrounded by advisors discussing budgets, transportation routes, and regional development plans. Important topics. Necessary topics. Yet his attention remained divided. Through the connection with his wolf, he watched Emily laugh. Just one brief laugh. It was enough to distract him completely. "Your Majesty." Alexander blinked and looked up. 12 officials stared back. Nathan sat at the opposite end of the table looking exhausted. "You have not heard a single word during the last 10 minutes, Nathan said. Alexander calmly folded his hands. "That is not true." "Then what was the last topic?" Silence. Nathan sighed deeply. Several advisors exchanged knowing looks. Alexander ignored all of them and looked toward the window where sunlight poured across the mountain peaks. Somewhere below, in a small town hidden among forests and rivers, a veterinarian was beginning to smile every time she saw his wolf. And for reasons he still could not fully explain, that felt more important than any meeting he attended. By Wednesday, the entire town had accepted the black wolf as part of daily life. Nobody questioned why he spent his days near Emily Carter's clinic. Nobody questioned why he followed her around Silver Creek like a loyal shadow. The only person still asking questions was Emily herself. And unfortunately for the wolf, she had started paying closer attention. The first clue appeared shortly after lunch. Emily was organizing supplies in the storage room when she heard the clinic door open. A little girl entered carrying a nervous beagle puppy wrapped in a blanket. The puppy trembled from nose to tail. Its wide brown eyes darted around the room anxiously. Emily immediately knelt beside the child. "Hey there, buddy," she said softly. "You are okay." Before she could continue, a large black shape appeared beside her. The wolf lowered himself slowly onto the floor beside the frightened puppy. No sudden movements. No pressure. Just quiet presence. The puppy stared. Then something remarkable happened. The trembling eased. The rapid breathing slowed. Within moments, the puppy had shuffled closer to the wolf and curled against his side. Emily blinked. "Well," the little girl smiled. "He is really good at that." Emily looked down at the wolf. Apparently, throughout the afternoon, she noticed more examples. A nervous rescue cat allowed him near without hissing. An injured rabbit relaxed when he sat beside its crate. Even the clinic's permanently grumpy parrot stopped squawking whenever the wolf entered the room. Animals trusted him instinctively. It should not have surprised her. Yet somehow it did. Most predators made smaller animals nervous. This wolf seemed to have the opposite effect. By closing time, Emily found herself watching him more carefully than ever. He always seemed to know exactly where he was needed. Exactly when someone was frightened. Exactly when she felt overwhelmed. The realization lingered as she locked the clinic and began the walk home. The evening air carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. Sunset painted the mountains in shades of orange and gold. Beside her, the wolf matched her pace perfectly. Not ahead, not behind. Beside. Emily glanced down at him. "You know what is strange?" The wolf looked up immediately. "I spend my entire life trying to understand animals." His ears perked. "And somehow you are the one animal I cannot figure out." For a moment, something flickered in his amber eyes. A flash of emotion so human that it made her chest tighten unexpectedly. Then it disappeared. The wolf simply continued walking. High above the valley, inside the mountain estate, Alexander stood on a balcony overlooking miles of forest. Nathan joined him carrying a tablet loaded with reports. "There is a problem." Alexander did not look away from the horizon. "There is always a problem. This one involves you." That got his attention. Nathan folded his arms. "You are spending too much time connected to your wolf." Alexander remained silent. Nathan continued. "You have not shifted this frequently in years." The Alpha King leaned against the railing. Cool mountain air moved through his dark hair. "I know. Then perhaps you should ask yourself why." Alexander looked toward the distant valley where Silver Creek sat hidden among forests and rivers. He already knew the answer. The problem was that he no longer wanted to stop. For years, people had approached him because of what he was. A king, a ruler, a source of influence. Power followed him everywhere. Expectations followed him everywhere. Yet Emily had never once looked at him that way. She did not know who he was. She did not care about titles. She simply cared. About every animal. Every person. Every living thing that crossed her path. Nathan watched realization settle across his friend's face. "Oh no." Alexander glanced over. "What?" Nathan pointed accusingly. "You are falling in love." Silence followed. The mountain wind rustled through the trees below. Then Alexander looked back toward the valley and smiled. Which was answer enough. The first truly warm Saturday of spring brought half of Silver Creek outdoors. Families filled the sidewalks. Farmers parked pickup trucks along Main Street. Local musicians played near the town square, while children chased one another beneath strings of colorful banners. Emily Carter usually loved community days. This year, however, she found herself distracted by a certain oversized companion who had somehow become the town's unofficial mascot. "There he is," a child shouted. The wolf immediately received 3 head pats, 2 treats, and an invitation to join a game involving a tennis ball. Emily stood nearby holding a lemonade and watched the entire scene unfold with disbelief. "You realize you are becoming more popular than I am." The wolf accepted another treat from a laughing teenager. Emily narrowed her eyes. "Do not look so proud of yourself." He looked extremely proud of himself. The afternoon passed beneath bright blue skies and warm sunshine. For the first time in weeks, Emily allowed herself to relax. No emergencies. No unusual cases. No mysterious symptoms from her most frequent visitor. Just a peaceful day surrounded by neighbors and friends. Then she noticed something strange. The wolf had disappeared. Emily glanced around the crowded square. No black fur. No amber eyes. No familiar shadow following behind her. The realization felt surprisingly unsettling. She told herself not to be ridiculous. He was a wild animal. He probably wandered off for a few hours. Yet 30 minutes passed. Then 45. Somehow she found herself searching every street corner, every patch of shade, every storefront window. Looking for someone? Mrs. Harper asked with a knowing smile. Emily immediately looked away. No. I am not. If you say so. Emily rolled her eyes and continued walking. Still, the absence lingered. The town felt oddly different without him nearby. Quieter somehow. Less familiar. As evening approached, people began packing up booths and folding tables. Long shadows stretched across Main Street. The golden light of sunset settled over the valley. Emily started the walk home alone. For the first time in weeks, no pause followed behind her. She hated how much she noticed. By the time she reached her cottage, the sky had turned shades of orange and lavender. She unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house felt unusually empty. Setting her keys on the counter, she shook her head at herself. This is ridiculous. She was talking about a wolf. A suspiciously intelligent wolf. A manipulative wolf. A wolf who almost certainly exaggerated medical symptoms for attention. But still a wolf. A sudden thump sounded outside. Emily froze. Another thump followed. She hurried to the front window and pulled back the curtain. There he was. The black wolf stood proudly on her porch, carrying something in his mouth. Emily opened the door. The wolf immediately trotted forward and dropped his prize at her feet. It was a bouquet. Not a perfect bouquet. Not professionally arranged flowers. More like a collection of wildflowers gathered from fields and forest edges. Blue lupins. Yellow daisies. Purple asters. Somehow they had remained mostly intact. Emily stared. The wolf stared back expectantly. Silence filled the porch. Finally she laughed. A genuine, helpless laugh that echoed into the evening air. Where did you even get these? The wolf sat down, looking pleased. Very pleased. Emily picked up the flowers carefully. The scent of spring drifted upward from the petals. For a moment her smile softened. Thank you. The wolf's tail immediately swept across the porch boards. High in the mountains, Nathan nearly dropped his coffee. Through the magical connection, he had witnessed the entire exchange. Absolutely not. Alexander looked up from his desk. What? Nathan pointed dramatically. You brought her flowers. Alexander remained perfectly calm. Wildflowers. That does not make it better. Nathan stared in disbelief. You are courting her. Silence. Then Alexander looked toward the distant valley and smiled again. Nathan groaned. Because once more, silence was answer enough. The wildflowers remained on Emily Carter's kitchen table for 3 days. Every morning, she passed them on her way to make coffee. Every evening, she caught herself smiling when she saw them. By the 4th day, she finally admitted a truth she had been avoiding. The black wolf had become part of her life. That realization should have felt strange. Instead, it felt natural. Monday afternoon brought a steady stream of patients through the clinic. A Labrador with an upset stomach. A pair of rescued kittens needing vaccinations. A nervous horse that refused to cooperate with anyone except its owner. Through it all, the wolf remained nearby as usual. Yet the more time Emily spent around him, the harder it became to ignore the growing list of oddities. It started with the door. Emily had stepped into the storage room for less than a minute. When she returned, she found the wolf sitting calmly inside the reception area, even though she distinctly remembered closing the door behind her. How did you get in here? She asked. The wolf looked away immediately. Emily narrowed her eyes. Later that afternoon, she dropped a clipboard beside her desk. Before she could bend down to retrieve it, the wolf nudged it toward her with surprising precision. Not random movement. Not curiosity. Purposeful action. The kind of thing she expected from a highly trained service animal. Not a wild wolf. Okay, she muttered. That was weird. The wolf pretended not to hear. Then came the moment that truly unsettled her. Near closing time, Mrs. Harper stopped by carrying homemade cookies. The elderly woman launched into one of her usual stories while Emily listened politely. Halfway through the conversation, Mrs. Harper mentioned that a developer wanted to purchase part of the forest outside town. Emily immediately frowned. That would be terrible for the wildlife. The wolf, who had been resting near the window, stood up so quickly that both women looked at him in surprise. His ears flattened. His posture stiffened. Every trace of relaxation vanished. Emily stared. You understood that. The wolf froze. Mrs. Harper laughed. Maybe he cares about conservation. Emily laughed too, but unease lingered beneath the humor. Because for one brief second, his reaction had felt less like instinct and more like opinion. That evening, after closing the clinic, Emily sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. The wolf lay stretched across the grass below the steps. Crickets sang from the fields. A cool breeze carried the scent of pine trees through the valley. For a while neither moved. Then Emily spoke quietly into the fading light. "Sometimes I feel like you are listening." One amber eye opened. "Not hearing. Listening." The wolf lifted his head. Emily shook hers with a soft laugh. "See? That is exactly what I mean." The silence that followed felt oddly comfortable. Somewhere deep inside, a realization was beginning to form. The wolf was hiding something. She did not know what. She did not know why. But every day brought another clue, another impossible moment, another reason to question what stood right in front of her. And for the first time, she found herself wondering whether the mystery was bigger than a clever animal with unusual habits. High above the valley, Alexander Blackwood stood alone on a balcony overlooking the forest. Through the bond with his wolf, he heard every word Emily had spoken. A slow smile appeared before fading into something more thoughtful. Because she was getting closer, much closer than he had expected. The discovery happened on a Thursday night when Emily Carter could not sleep. A cool wind rattled the branches outside her bedroom window, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain through the valley. She turned over, checked the clock, and sighed. 2:14 in the morning. Normally, she would have been asleep hours ago. Instead, her thoughts kept circling the same impossible questions. The wolf, the strange behavior, the way he seemed to understand everything, the way he always appeared exactly when she needed him. Finally, she gave up on sleep. Pulling on a sweater, she padded quietly through the house and headed toward the kitchen. Moonlight spilled through the windows, painting silver shapes across the floorboards. Emily filled a glass with water and glanced toward the front porch. Then she froze. The wolf was not there. That alone was unusual. For weeks he had spent nearly every evening nearby, sometimes on the porch, sometimes beneath the maple tree, sometimes stretched across the grass like a silent guardian. Tonight, however, the yard stood empty beneath the moonlight. Emily stepped closer to the window. A strange feeling settled in her chest. Curiosity, concern, something she could not quite name. Setting down the glass, she slipped on her boots and quietly stepped outside. The night air felt cool against her skin. Crickets hummed from the fields. Somewhere far away an owl called through the darkness. "Where did you go?" she murmured. A movement caught her attention near the edge of the property. A large black shape slipped between the trees. The wolf. Emily hesitated. Then she followed. The forest behind her cottage was familiar territory. She had walked these trails for years. Moonlight filtered through the branches overhead, creating shifting patterns across the ground. Ahead of her, the wolf moved silently through the trees. Every few moments he glanced back. Not running, not hiding, almost as if he knew she was there, almost as if he wanted her to follow. Emily's pulse quickened. "What are you doing?" she whispered. The wolf continued deeper into the forest. Then suddenly he stopped. Emily quickly ducked behind a large pine tree. Through the branches, she watched him step into a moonlit clearing. For several seconds nothing happened. The forest remained silent. Then the wolf looked directly toward her hiding place. Her breath caught. Even from that distance, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. Neither moved. Neither looked away. Then something even stranger happened. The wolf glanced toward the sky. His posture shifted. Not dramatically, just enough for Emily to notice. And in that instant a realization hit her, so hard she nearly stepped backward. He knew she was there. Not guessed. Knew. Every instinct screamed that she should reveal herself. Demand answers. Walk into the clearing and force this mystery into the open. But something stopped her. A feeling she could not explain. So she remained hidden. After another moment, the wolf turned and disappeared into the darkness beyond the clearing. Emily stood frozen beneath the trees long after he was gone. The walk home felt different somehow. The questions had multiplied. The puzzle pieces no longer fit together. Because tonight had confirmed something she could no longer deny. This was not normal animal behavior. Not even close. Back at the mountain estate, Alexander stood alone on a balcony overlooking endless forests beneath the moonlit sky. He knew exactly how close Emily had come to discovering the truth. Through the bond, he had felt her presence in the trees. Felt her watching. Felt her growing certainty. Nathan stepped outside carrying 2 mugs of coffee. One look at Alexander's expression made him pause. What happened? Alexander stared toward the distant valley, where a single light still glowed from Emily's cottage. A slow smile touched his lips. She is starting to figure it out. Nathan closed his eyes. That is not the reassuring answer you think it is. Emily Carter spent the next 2 days watching. She watched every movement, every reaction, every impossible coincidence. Once she started paying attention, she could not stop. Friday arrived beneath bright spring sunshine. The clinic bustled with activity from the moment she unlocked the doors. Yet throughout the day, her attention kept drifting toward the black wolf. He noticed. Of course he noticed. That only made her more suspicious. Around noon, a delivery driver arrived carrying several large boxes of medical supplies. Emily was struggling to balance paperwork, answer questions, and direct the unloading process all at once. Before she could point toward the correct storage room, the wolf stood and walked directly to the proper door. The driver laughed. Smart animal. Emily did not laugh. Because the supplies had never been delivered before, there was no reason for him to know where they belonged. Later that afternoon, she conducted a small experiment. While organizing files behind the reception desk, she spoke casually without looking up. I think I might close early tomorrow. The wolf immediately lifted his head. Emily pretended not to notice. 10 minutes later, she added, Actually, maybe I will stay open all day. Once again, the wolf reacted. Not dramatically, just enough. A slight shift. A flick of the ears. The kind of response someone would have while listening to a conversation. Emily's heart began beating faster. That evening, she sat alone on her porch watching the sunset fade across the valley. The wolf rested nearby as usual. Golden light painted the mountains. Birds drifted across the sky. Everything appeared peaceful. Emily took a slow breath. I know you understand me. The wolf opened one eye. And before you pretend that was random, it was not. Silence. You understand every word. The wolf remained perfectly still. Emily leaned forward. Who are you? For a brief moment, something changed. The playful expression she had grown accustomed to vanished. In its place appeared something older, wiser, almost sad. Then it disappeared. The wolf stood and walked toward the edge of the yard. Emily followed immediately. Moonlight had begun to spill across the fields as darkness settled over Silver Creek. The wolf paused near the tree line and looked back at her. Once, twice, waiting. Emily felt the same strange pull she had experienced days earlier in the forest. Curiosity overcame caution. She followed. Together, they moved through familiar trails beneath towering pines. Cool air carried the scent of earth and cedar. Branches swayed gently overhead. The wolf led her deeper into the woods than ever before. Finally, they reached the same clearing she had discovered several nights ago. Moonlight flooded the open space like liquid silver. The wolf stepped into the center and stopped. Emily remained near the trees, her pulse racing. Why did you bring me here? She whispered. The wolf turned toward her. Amber eyes locked onto hers. Neither moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then a distant voice shattered the silence. Alexander. The name echoed through the forest. Emily froze. The wolf froze. From the far side of the clearing, a tall man emerged between the trees. He wore dark clothing and moved with obvious urgency. The moment his gaze landed on the wolf, relief crossed his face. There you are. I have been searching everywhere. Emily's breath caught. The man walked directly toward the wolf as though speaking to an old friend. Then he stopped suddenly. His eyes widened, because he had finally noticed Emily standing at the edge of the clearing. Silence crashed over the forest. The man's expression shifted from surprise to horror. The wolf slowly closed his eyes. And for the first time, Emily realized she was standing in the middle of a secret that everyone except her seemed to understand. Emily Carter stared at the stranger standing in the moonlit clearing. The man looked somewhere in his 30s, tall and athletic, with dark hair and an expression that suggested he had just made a terrible mistake. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The forest remained silent except for the distant rustle of leaves moving in the night breeze. Then the man cleared his throat. This is awkward. Emily blinked. You think? His gaze darted toward the wolf. Then back to Emily. Then back to the wolf again. The look he received in return seemed to make things worse. Right, he muttered. Very awkward. Emily folded her arms. Would somebody like to explain what is happening? The wolf sat perfectly still. The stranger looked as though he desperately wanted to be anywhere else. I can explain some things, he said carefully. Good. Not all things. Emily narrowed her eyes. That is not encouraging. The stranger sighed heavily. My name is Nathan Hayes. And Nathan hesitated. And your friend there is not exactly what he appears to be. Emily almost laughed. Trust me, I figured that part out weeks ago. Nathan looked genuinely surprised. You did? The fake injuries were a clue. Nathan closed his eyes. Of course they were. The wolf lowered his head slightly. Emily pointed directly at him. See? That reaction. He knows exactly what we are talking about. Nathan stared at the wolf. You faked injuries? The wolf looked away. Alexander. The name slipped out before Nathan could stop it. Emily froze. The wolf froze. Nathan immediately looked horrified. I was not supposed to say that. The silence that followed seemed endless. Emily slowly turned toward the wolf. Alexander. The wolf's amber eyes met hers. For the first time since she had known him, there was no playfulness in his expression. No clever distraction. No attempt to change the subject. Just quiet acceptance. Emily's pulse quickened. That is your name. The wolf stood. Moonlight spilled across his dark fur as he took several slow steps forward. Nathan backed away instinctively. Perhaps I should leave. Neither of them heard him. Emily could not look away from the wolf. Every strange moment of the past several weeks rushed through her mind. The flowers. The understanding in his eyes. The impossible intelligence. The feeling that someone had been listening every time she spoke. Suddenly, all the puzzle pieces began sliding together. Not enough to reveal the entire picture, but enough to show the outline. You are not just a wolf, she whispered. The wolf stopped only a few feet away. His gaze never left hers. Emily felt no fear. Strangely, she never had. Even now. Especially now. The realization settled into her chest with surprising certainty. Whatever secret he was hiding, it was connected to the reason she had trusted him from the very beginning. Nathan glanced nervously between them. Well, he said softly, this conversation is probably going to become much more complicated very soon. Emily barely heard him, because standing beneath the silver glow of the moon, staring into eyes that suddenly seemed far too intelligent to belong to any ordinary animal, she realized the truth was finally within reach. And for the first time, the wolf did not seem interested in hiding it. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. Moonlight flooded the clearing, turning the grass silver and casting long shadows beneath the trees. Emily Carter stood frozen, her eyes locked on the wolf before her. Nathan looked as though he desperately wanted to disappear. And the wolf simply watched her, calm and silent, as if he had finally reached the moment he could no longer avoid. Then something changed. A warm gust of wind swept through the clearing. Leaves rustled overhead. The air itself seemed to shimmer. Emily blinked. The wolf stepped forward once. Then the impossible happened. Light flowed around him like liquid moonlight. It was not frightening. It was beautiful. Soft silver radiance wrapped around his dark form, hiding him from view for only a few seconds. When the light faded, the wolf was gone. In his place stood a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired. His silver eyes reflected the moon exactly the way the wolf's amber eyes always had. Emily could not breathe. Every strange moment of the past several weeks crashed together inside her mind. The fake injuries, the flowers, the intelligence, the understanding, the feeling that she had never truly been alone whenever he was near. The man looked at her with quiet uncertainty. Hello, Emily. Even his voice felt familiar somehow. Emily stared. Then she laughed once. Not because anything was funny, because reality had completely given up making sense. You are kidding me. Hey. Faint smile touched his lips. I wish I were. Nathan immediately pointed at him. For the record, I told him this was a terrible plan. Nathan, Alexander said. I am helping. Emily held up a hand without taking her eyes off Alexander. No. Nobody talked for a second. Silence returned. She studied him carefully. The silver eyes. The expression. The way he tilted his head when she spoke. Suddenly she saw it. Every habit. Every mannerism. Every tiny reaction she had learned to recognize. They had been there the entire time. Hidden in plain sight. It was you, she whispered. Alexander nodded. Yes. Emily folded her arms. You pretended to be injured. He looked mildly embarrassed. Sometimes. You faked a cough. A few times. You followed me around town for weeks. That is technically true. Emily shook her head. You brought me wildflowers. Alexander smiled. You like them. The ridiculousness of the entire situation finally overwhelmed her. She laughed again, this time for real. Alexander's shoulders visibly relaxed at the sound. For a moment nobody spoke. The forest seemed quieter than ever. Then Emily looked directly into his eyes. Who are you? The answer came softly. Alexander Blackwood. Nathan winced. Emily waited. Alexander continued. Alpha King of the Northern Territories. Silence. A very long silence. Then Emily blinked. You are a king? Yes. And instead of introducing yourself like a normal person, you pretended to be a sick animal? Nathan immediately covered his face. Alexander actually laughed. A genuine laugh that echoed through the clearing. When you say it like that, it sounds much worse. Emily stared at him for 2 seconds before laughing too. Above them, stars filled the Montana sky. Around them, the forest breathed softly beneath the moonlight. For the first time since they met, there were no secrets left between them. Only truth. And as Alexander looked at the woman who had cared for him long before she knew his name, he realized something remarkable. For all his titles, power, and responsibilities, the happiest moment of his life had begun with a fake limp, a terrible cough, and a veterinarian who was kind enough to stop and help.